America has some bold statements put out by our founding fathers. The Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. And yet, racial injustice has always been. It's always been a part of America. Prior to World War II, there was some hatred, antagonism, many negative things said about Asians in general and about Japanese specifically. We're well aware of the fact that white Europeans, not the majority, but a number of white Europeans really had no use for Japanese here. They felt that they were the real Americans. I am an American citizen as much as they are. I was born here in Portland, Oregon, and yet I felt like a second-class citizen the way I was treated. My name is George Yoshio Nakata. I'm born here in Portland, Oregon many years ago, right here in Nihonmachi. I grew up here and then went to the Portland Assembly Center prior to World War II, and then on to Minidoka, returned back to Portland after World War II, went to college and had my professional career right here in Portland. Well, Nihonmachi was the first place for Japanese directly from Japan, like my Issei immigrant parents, to settle. There were about 49 different Japantowns up and down the West Coast, a number of them here in Oregon, and the one here was the largest in Oregon, here in Northwest Portland. From the Willamette River up to about 6th, from Ankeny Street to Gleason Street, there are probably 120 different families that resided here in Old Nihonmachi. Well, our family happened to live in the Pomona Hotel on 2nd Avenue. Our school was St. Paul Miki, attended by Japanese Americans, taught by Catholic nuns. I remember the Melita store, I remember the Teikoku and Furuya store, I remember the fish market there, the Saito Fish Market on 4th Avenue. I remember the bathhouse on Everett Street. This area is very, very familiar to me, completely different today, of course, but brings back very, very fond memories in my childhood. With Executive Order 9066 by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, it created 10 different concentration camps that housed over 120,000 Japanese. Minidoka in southern Idaho happened to be one of them. But it was the concentration camp for Japanese and Japanese Americans from Portland, from Seattle, from Tacoma, from the entire Pacific Northwest. And so in early May, we had to pack up all of our goods, and for the most part, we lost all of our family possessions. People have to understand that Japanese, this was their community. The neighbor to my left, to my right, above me, in front of me, they were all Japanese. Simply put, we could not leave our things with our neighbor. They too were going to be incarcerated. So the entire Japanese community was getting rid of things, selling things, dumping things, destroying things in preparation of just moving out with bag and baggage, only that which we could carry. And so I had only the clothes that I was wearing, a book or two in my little box, a little piece of candy, and that was my farewell to my Portland home. And as a youngster, I had no idea what the future would be like. Minidoka consisted of 44 blocks. Some of the blocks were dedicated for a hospital, a school, whatever. But there were 37 residential blocks. Each block had 12 barracks. Each barrack had 6 units. So there were 72 different families in each block. The food was reasonably well, and we ended up with a garden that we made out of this very terrible clay soil. We got the water from the irrigation ditch, made it into an arable land, and grew a Japanese eggplant, napa, and some vegetables that we had throughout the camp. In fact, Minidoka produced such good vegetables that we ended up sharing it with other camps. So Minidoka was quite proud of its vegetable gardens. In 1943, they started to have volunteers from our Minidoka camp that volunteered for the 442nd, and they fought for America. The 442nd was the one that rescued Dachau and rescued many Jewish camps. It had a tremendous record of over 9,000 Purple Hearts and over 20 Medals of Honor. Finally, in the August and September, with the bombing, the atomic bombs, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, the war finally ends. We're told we can go home. So we went down to the Twin Falls rail yard and we received $25. $25. Have this to get started in life. Later I thought about that. $25. My father, he lost the operation of a hotel and 2 markets on Columbia Boulevard. He had 3 growing businesses. He lost it, and he was given $25 to get started. The fate of Japanese Americans trying to get back into life. The American government never tells the story that they stripped them of their freedom, put them in their concentration camps, and when the war was over, they gave them $25. The Issei's are extremely resilient people. They may be small in stature, but they were tough. They were strong. They're strong-willed. And they brought the culture with them to teach the Nisei and the Sansei. But the hardships that they endured, they weren't bitter. What they went through is hard to imagine. When you build up your home, your life, and you have everything taken away, and you're stripped of your freedom, and you're put behind barbed wires, how traumatic must that have been? They lost their whole life. They lost all their possessions. My father not only lost a car, he lost 3 businesses. My mother lost everything. She lost her kimonos that she brought from Okayama. All of it. She lost. And yet, they went. They went into camp. They were incarcerated. And then, finally, they endured that hardship to return to their home. They consider Portland their home away from Japan, their home in America. This is their home. This is their home. This area, this Old Town area, is the home for the Issei. We came back to Portland. There's no Japantown. We ended up in St. John's in a housing project. My father had to take public transportation, transferring 2 buses to get down and being a maker of mashed potatoes 6 days a week so that we could make a living. I went to James John School. I was the first Japanese there. And it took me only an instant to find out that my teacher hated Japanese. I remember the playground that first day. There was a tournament going on, and my homeroom said, "George, do you play football?" Yes, I played football in camp. I caught footballs. I was a fair athlete at that time. And suddenly, my teammates became friends. They wanted to walk home with me to my housing project. And as we walked home, people from their houses came out and shouted at me and pointed a finger and said, hey, you dirty Jap, go back to your country. And my classmates stood up and said, "What are you talking about? This is George, our friend." They stood up for me, my classmates. Things that you just don't forget. So when we skip forward to 2021, and I see the changes made in Portland, and I see the Japanese community coming together and making a Japanese-American Museum of Oregon, a place that we could rekindle our past, to kind of have a memory lane that we could walk down, to have photographs and memorabilia that remind us of Nihonmachi past, a reminder of our childhood. This area that JAMO is located today was my old home way back when. I'm very happy that this new home for the museum is located here on 4th and Flanders. This was a part of Japantown past, and now it's part of our Japantown today. Well, it's no longer Japantown in its spirit, the language, the restaurants, and all the Japanese that resided here. It is totally a different atmosphere. Yet the structures, the street is somewhat similar. There were cobblestone streets at that time. There were streetcars and trolleys. So these are different times. But at the same time, tucked away in the back of my mind I still feel a sense of Japantown when I still come here even today.